Tonight, the efforts to protect former President Donald Trump. The head of the Secret Service saying today the agency's plans to keep Trump safe were effective.
The subject, who did not have line of sight to the former president, fled the scene. He did not fire or get off any shots at our agents.
But there are still questions here, like how did the wannabe assassin in Sunday's failed attempt hide for 12 hours without anyone seemingly knowing? We'll show you how he escaped agents before the first shots were fired. J.D. Vance, by the way, in the state of Georgia this hour with his first reaction potentially. Once he speaks, we'll take you there live. Also tonight here on the Hill, no tax on overtime. So who pays? We're speaking with the man who first introduced the idea that is now embraced by Trump. And they've got 1 million members, the Teamsters Union. Are they ready to endorse Kamala Harris? Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. You are watching the most politically unpredictable show on all of television. This is The Hill on NewsNation. Unprecedented and hyper-dynamic. That is how the head of the United States Secret Service is describing the threat level involving Donald Trump as a second wannabe assassin tried to take the former president's life. Speaking to reporters this afternoon, Ronald Rowe says the security plan put into place, quote unquote, worked. Rowe saying Trump is now receiving increased assets since the first assassination attempt. And Sunday afternoon, Trump's security detail included, for example, counter-sniper teams, counter-surveillance, counter-tactical teams, and counter-unmanned aerial systems. But the new head of the agency also revealing he has ordered a complete shift with the Secret Service's procedures.
The long and short of it is this. Coming out of Butler, I have ordered a paradigm shift. The Secret Service's protective methodologies work, and they are sound, and we saw that yesterday. But the way we are positioned right now in this dynamic threat environment, it has given me guidance to say, you know what, we need to look at what our protective methodology is.
Still many questions remain. We now know that the man who was found with a rifle along the fence line had been there for roughly 12 hours. He was spotted by an advance agent a hole ahead of Trump. That's roughly a few hundred yards. Now, Trump today responded in part by blaming the rhetoric of Democrats, saying in a social media post, quote, because of this communist left rhetoric, the bullets are flying and it will only get worse, end quote. Now, a much different response, though, here in Washington. President Biden, who once again condemned political violence, suggested that Congress act to beef up the Secret Service.
I want to make clear, the service needs more help, and I think Congress should respond to their needs. They, in fact, need more funding.
Now, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, suggesting this morning that resources need to be reallocated.
We are demanding in the House that he have every asset available, and we will make more available if necessary. I don't think it's a funding issue. I think it's a manpower allocation.
In a moment, I will be joined by the top Democrat on the bipartisan committee that is looking into the first assassination attempt. I'll also show you the massive undertaking the Secret Service is involved with at this moment and walk you through the exact spot the wannabe assassin was hiding and explain how that was a known weak spot. Joining me today throughout the Hill this hour, Linda Tran, former senior advisor to the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, Chris Steyerwalt, host of the Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute as well, Kelly Meyer, NewsNation Washington correspondent, and Mick Mulvaney, NewsNation contributor, former chief of staff in the Trump White House. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in on this Monday, a busy start to the week for a reason no one wants, but here we are again with a second assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Chris, a lot going on here. There's conversations in Washington about sort of the Secret Service and what they need to or don't need to do next. You've got Donald Trump saying this is because of the language of Democrats. Where are we right now?
Well, life is weird and hard, and human nature is undefeated. A one lunatic, committed assassin is hard to deal with. There's no security system in the world that can 100% of the time make sure that no one gets within a certain distance. And I think the Secret Service it's good that they have a win today. It's good that they can say the system worked the way that it worked. We found the guy when we were doing our sweep and it happened. And I think this should be an encouragement to Americans that they're on the job.
You know the Secret Service well. You've had protection, I think, at one point during your career when you were the chief of staff. You know Donald Trump well also. What do you make of his response? Obviously, it is a unique for the moment position that he is in right now. And I wonder how you make of sort of the events of the last 24 hours and how he's responded.
Yeah, we didn't talk about this before the show, but what did Chris just say? That human nature is undefeated. Listen, if people have been calling me Hitler for a long time and then someone takes a shot at me, am I going to think that maybe the rhetoric had something to do with it? I think that's probably human nature. I'm with Chris, though, on this for right now. We'll talk about it more later in the show. It worked this time. The Secret Service worked this time. This is not a Butler, Pennsylvania situation where you had breakdown after breakdown after breakdown. This is the Secret Service at their best. Not only did they find it before a shot was taken, before a clean line of sight was given, they found it as part of their proper procedures. They sweep in front of the president at the golf course. I've been to the golf course. We've talked about that.
You're going to walk us through this coming up.
Exactly. Where he was, where the shooter was. This was a known weak point. They knew to look there. If you're not looking there, you're probably not going to see it. It's so heavily wooded, you're not going to see a rifle scope unless you're looking for it at that time. So things worked here. So let's focus on that, but we can also talk about the rhetoric if we want to.
All right. The Secret Service, by the way, has a massive task, a massive undertaking. For example, right now, they are assigned with protecting President Biden, Vice President Harris, and the other presidential hopefuls, Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Tim Walz, along with their families. But it does not end there. The Secret Service is also charged with protecting former Presidents Obama, Bush, and Clinton, and the former First Ladies. President Carter, of course, as well. When foreign leaders visit the United States, they get protection too. The Secret Service is also involved with securing what is known as national special security events. The Super Bowl, for example, gets that designation. Now, we've looked into the numbers here on the Hill. For example, this year, the Secret Service budget is roughly $3 billion, nearly half of that going toward protection. For context, in 2016, it was about $1.9 billion. Joining us now is the top Democrat on the Congressional Bipartisan Task Force that is investigating the failed assassination attempt of Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. That group has been ongoing for about a couple months now, and the top Democrat on that committee is Congressman Jason Crow, Democrat of Colorado. Congressman, thanks for being back with us here on the Hill.
Yeah, it's always good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I wonder, Congressman, if you are in the same camp as Chris and as Mick Mulvaney and as the U.S. Secret Service Director, the interim Ronald Rowe, in that this was a success. He used the words effective and worked. But then again, there was also an individual who had a rifle in the vicinity of the former president. So was yesterday a success or a failure as you view it?
Well, it's too early for me to classify this because we're still conducting our investigation, looking into this, and it's actually unclear whether or not our task force is going to be given the mandate to look at this incident as well as the Butler, Pennsylvania incident. We might be, but Speaker Johnson and Hakeem Jeffries need to make that decision and then expand our mandate to look at it. But what I can say is there are two different frames of looking at this, as your panel rightfully pointed out. There are two very different frames of looking at this. One is whether or not there are processes or protocols and procedures that failed, and the second is whether or not it's just a resourcing problem. They're under-resourced.
Do you want them to expand this, Congressman?
Well, that's the decision for the House and for House leadership. I mean, we are willing to undertake that mission if that's what the House of Representatives wants us to do. I mean, we are here to serve. This is a bipartisan task force. Me and Chairman Kelly are working really well together. It's filled with a bunch of very serious members with great experience, and we're doing great work. So we're ready to do that if that's what the House of Representatives wants us to do.
The President of the United States, as you know, has more protection, Secret Service protection, than anyone else. And we all understand why that is the case. But, Congressman, this is not a normal point in time. I think we all can agree. Obviously, there's precedents in history here, unfortunately. But right now, we haven't seen anything like this in decades. Do you believe, Congressman, that Donald Trump has the same protection as President Biden? And does Donald Trump have, in your view, what he needs from a Secret Service perspective to stay safe?
After July 13th, President Biden ordered for the Secret Service to provide the same level of personal security and detail to former President Trump and to Vice President Harris. Now, that's different than the sitting president, right? The sitting president ultimately has certain technology, certain vehicles, certain things that accompany the sitting president that a non-sitting president has just because of national security reasons. That's different from just the security detail. So that security has been escalated. But listen, we're in an environment right now that's pretty unprecedented. It's unprecedented both because you have a sitting president who's not a candidate, you have a vice president who is a candidate, you have a former president who is a candidate, and then you have two vice presidents, you have a bunch of former presidents, and then you have all their family. That's asking a lot. On top of it, we're in a threat environment that's the highest that we've probably ever seen, that I've certainly ever seen in my lifetime. You have foreign adversaries targeting our sitting and former officials. You have extremist threats. You have lone wolf threats. There are 4 times as many threats against Congress as there were just a couple of years ago. So we definitely have to look at both the model, the paradigm, as acting Director Rowe talked about the paradigm of how we provide security, but also the resources. Because, listen, you just can't ask that number of agents, the same number of agents, doing things the same way as we've been doing for 15 or 20 years to change radically without additional resources.
Very frank, very upfront with us tonight. Jason Crow, the top Democrat on that committee investigating at least the first attempted assassination. Congressman Crow, thanks for being back with us here on the Hill. Appreciate your time as always, sir.
Thank you.
You got it. We are learning, Kelly, of a phone call between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Tell me.
So we just found out from a White House official that the two did speak today. We also just got a statement in from Libby Dean, who covers Trump for us, saying that they had a nice call, is what the former president is saying. So not too many details around it, but he said, President Biden conveyed that he's glad he's safe. But we do know that they talked. Don't know how long that phone call was, but we just found that out as he was returning here to the White House tonight.
Do you blame Mick and Donald Trump for saying what they've said, which is that the rhetoric against Democrats, you can't blame Trump for.
I thought you was going to blame me for the shooting.
No. But
I blame Mick for many things.
You laid it out, though, why Donald Trump would say blame the Democrats for the rhetoric. Does he have a point here?
I think there's a point broadly about all of the rhetoric, but you can't take it all in a vacuum. I mean, it's easy to argue that Donald Trump was the turning point, turning social norms on their head and calling, whether it's Kamala Harris or other candidates that he's faced, many, many names and saying horrible things himself. So I would say broadly, everyone needs to dial it down. Everyone needs to bring down the temperature.
You know, I found it interesting there from Congressman Crow. You were right hand to Pete Buttigieg, senior advisor, Secret Service protection.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, Mick, you've literally had Secret Service protection. The congressman, and I'm not putting words in his mouth here, but it sounded like they're overwhelmed, right? And I think that's part of the conversation going forward here. Is that how you see it?
I think so. I have had the opportunity to work with Secret Service both when President Obama was in the White House and then obviously in both tours at the Department of Transportation. And I think to a T, every single officer of the United States Secret Service has taken their job extremely seriously. They work extraordinarily hard. And I think that what the representative laid out there with the level of threat and the number of potential targets and the sources of the aggressions, it's a tough job for them right now. And I think we need to take a really good, close look at the processes and what can be improved. But I definitely don't think we should be denigrating them.
I think it's hard to explain to a member of the public just how all-encompassing this is. My team was, I think, 12 people. So there were 8 on at any one time and 4 off. And everywhere you go, if you have coverage, they are with you. The amount of time these folks spend away from their families is just, it's mind-boggling. The commitment to time to be in this particular service is overwhelming. When you're on the VIP coverage and the amount of money we spend is $3 billion. Is a lot of money. So it doesn't surprise me they're pulled extraordinarily thin. The point about the foreign threats was really what got my attention. I'd forgotten all about that. That's right. Because
Iran has been after Donald Trump since the killing of Soleimani. How does this, real quick, Chris, how does this evolve, for lack of a better term, here in Washington?
Well, I will just say, we should not worry about. I'm all for people being nice. I'm nice. I want people to be nice. But if we get in the business of attributing the bad acts, the deranged acts of people to rhetoric, we are making a mistake. If words could cause people to kill, Donald Trump there'd be an army in the streets already, right? January 6th, when Democrats tried to say Donald Trump made them do it, they should be careful about that too. People should be responsible for their own actions. They should be held accountable for what they do, not try to put the words in other politicians.
All right, still to come here on the Hill. What is going on in Iowa? We talked about Iowa in a while, by the way. Steyerwalt is here to break down why that state is giving us a potential idea of what is happening all across the Midwest. And you are looking live right now, Cobb County, Georgia, swing state we talk about all the time. J.D. Vance set to speak later this hour with the Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. We will take you there live once Vance speaks, potentially his first comments from the weekend. Plus, why did the failed assassin choose this spot right here? You see this spot? That's where he was for 12 hours, give or take. Mulvaney says there is an exact reason why he went right there. Mick's been on the golf course with Donald Trump more than a dozen times, and he will share why that's the spot that this person went to. Well, we're going to walk you through the scene. Hello from Washington. 7 weeks from tomorrow, the first polls will be closing at this hour. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. We're back in a few. Stay with us. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. Live look right now, Trump International Golf Course in West Palm Beach, Florida. 2 assassination attempts on the former president in just over 2 months. But there are new questions tonight about the first attempt. The senator from Missouri, Republican Josh Hawley, is revealing what he describes as a whistleblower report on the Butler, Pennsylvania attempt. Now, Hawley's report contends, for example, that the top agent responsible for the site failed a key exam required in order to become a Secret Service agent. Secret Service agents paired with federal and local law enforcement officials to handle reports of suspicious people at the rally. However, none of them ended up actually attending that rally. The report also says there was poor security at the hospital where Donald Trump eventually went and later received treatment. Now, by the way, continued questions, of course, about yesterday's attempt. Mick Mulvaney, hello. Come on back in. So here's why I wanted to talk to Mick. You've played golf with Donald Trump at this golf course how many times, give or take?
Couple dozen.
Okay. So when this happened yesterday, I texted Mick, and the first thing basically that you said to me was...
Is it at the 5th or 6th hole? Because that's what always worried me about that golf layout.
Why?
So close to the road. As you can see here, when Trump was that's the 5th green. It's a par 3.
So fifth green, 6th hole.
Yeah, the next tee, which is just to the right of that red box, is literally 20 feet from a major road. I think it's Congress Avenue, Congress Street, whatever. And you can see the road through the fence. They put up some landscaping and a green screen and so forth, but it's very, very close. But the place that always worried me the most, Blake, was in the box at the bottom, at the dog leg left in that 6th.
So let's show the 6th hole, fly the animation in if you can. This is the 6th hole where the suspect was. So
this is the 5th hole.
This is the 5th hole, okay.
So,
we're going to get past this.
In the back of this, you would see the road. See the fence? The road is immediately on the side of the fence.
Okay, so it's that area take us to 6 if you wouldn't mind.
That's
so
fine.
It's that area back there that really worried you.
That was where you could see how close the road was.
Okay.
The place that really worried me is on the next hole when you get to we're not going to get to this.
Okay, that's fine.
Is in the corner. If you go back to the previous graphic, I can show it again. There's a dog leg right. The hole goes out and turns to the right.
There you go.
There at the bottom of this screen where you see the flowers, that is what always worried me the most, because it's the one place where you could be close to the road and not be seen, but still have a good look. Look at how much of the golf course you can see from that one particular area.
Right.
That, to me, was all... Listen, this is how I put it. I would never do this, but this is how I looked at it when I was playing golf there. If I wanted to harm the president, that's exactly where I would...
That spot, which is where they found him.
And he and I talked about that. And the Secret Service...
You talked to Trump about it? You mentioned this to Trump?
Sure. And the Secret Service knew about it and so forth. So that's why I think this is an example of the Secret Service doing their job properly. Because, again, you're only going to find what they found if you are looking for it. Think about that. It's a heavily wooded area, close to the road, but heavily
wooded. So you see the trees down here.
Exactly. So you can hide, and you've got good cover. You're not going to see a rifle scope unless you're actually looking for it. But that was when you wrote me the other day or 2 days ago, like that's where it probably would be.
So we learned today that the suspect was there for 12 hours, give or take, which means he was there at about 2 in the morning. These are two major streets, by the way. Yeah. This is Congress, which I believe is 8 lanes. That is Summit, which I believe, I was looking on Google Earth, is 7 lanes. So it's not like this is in the middle of nowhere.
No. This is, and it's probably just 10 or 15 minutes from Mar-a-Lago. So this is easy to get to, but still easy to hide in. Look at the foliage at the bottom of that screen and the places you could go in there and hide out.
All right. A little bit of the look there at the golf course. Again, Mix played with Trump there, I don't know, he says north of a dozen times, and that immediately stood out to him. Thank you for walking us through it. Appreciate it. All right, still much more ahead here on The Hill. Live look right now in the state of Georgia. J.D. Vance expected to talk at any moment right now. And Brian Kemp, the governor, I am told, is up there speaking. When J.D. Vance starts talking, presumably about the attempt, we will dip in live and listen to J.D. Vance. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. Back in 4 minutes. Welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. 50 days until November 5th, Election Day. Live look right now, by the way. The Faith and Freedom Coalition's dinner in Cobb County, Georgia. They got to the microphone there, and there's Ralph Reed right on cue. J.D. Vance, of course, Donald Trump's running mate, expected to speak at any moment now. Believed to be potentially his first comments since the events of yesterday. And when that happens, we will dip in live and listen live to J.D. Vance. Now, earlier here in Washington, by the way, the vice president, the Democratic nominee, Kamala Harris, met with members of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, the Teamsters Union, to make her pitch for the union's endorsement. An endorsement could come at some point the middle of this week, both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris actively seeking that. Meantime, as we told you earlier, of course, a suspected gunman now charged with federal gun crimes in what the FBI is calling a second assassination attempt against the former president. Ryan Routh appeared in court today in South Florida as he pointed an AK-47 through a fence where Trump was playing golf at his course in Palm Beach. Joining us now here on The Hill, Republican Congressman from the state of Idaho, Russ Fulcher. Congressman joins us live, I believe, for the first time here on The Hill. Thanks for being with us, sir.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on today.
You got it. We're learning a lot now, Congressman. Let's start with the events down in South Florida about this individual who pointed a gun through the fence. The Secret Service at that point fired shots, and now we know the Secret Service basically says that they were ahead of Donald Trump and were able to thwart what happened there on the golf course. There's a debate now seemingly taking place in Washington about what to do next with the Secret Service, whether this is about manpower, funding, or something else. Where are you?
Well, first of all, who would have thought the biggest potential deciding factor for this election is keeping Donald Trump alive? Typically in an election cycle, we're worried about policies, voter turnout, and those types of things. But right now, it's just simply keeping Donald Trump alive. So thankfully, there was a Secret Service agent who was doing his job and apparently saved the president's life, and that's wonderful. But overall, I have to tell you, the intelligence community in general has lost a lot of trust within Congress. They've earned a lot of that mistrust. If I'm President Trump and my objective is to stay alive, I want to look at a lot of different options, including possibly even private security to enhance some of these needs. But the intelligence community has not been forthright in their communication with Congress.
Let me talk to you about policies here for a second, Congressman, because the one that Donald Trump came out with last week is your idea. You introduced a bill of no tax on overtime. We know Donald Trump had been talking about no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security checks. But you were the one that came forward, which I'm thrilled to talk to you about, on this idea of no tax on overtime. Congressman, this would we've got $35 trillion in debt. Deficits, Donald Trump racked up nearly $1 trillion before COVID hit. And you know where it's gone since then. How is this a good idea, considering what we're facing with debts and deficits?
Well, it allows people to keep more money in their own pocket, the money that they earn. And we want to encourage work. For so long, we've had bad habits in this country where we've had government programs that basically enable people not to work, good, healthy people. And so by eliminating the federal tax, income tax on overtime pay, we're encouraging work. We're allowing people to keep more money in their pocket. They're going to take that money. They're going to invest it. They're going to spend it. They're going to put it back in the economy, and they're going to do it more efficiently than some government program. And so I'm delighted that President Trump has jumped on board.
But, Congressman, we learned today that for the first time, our interest payments on the debt topped $1 trillion. Okay, that is 12 zeros. We looked into, for example, to try to put into context what $1 trillion is. You could buy Walmart with $1 trillion and have a lot of money left over. You could buy Walmart and Pepsi and still have money left over. Heck, the Kansas City Chiefs, the back-to-back Super Bowl champs, I mean, that $4.85 billion they're worth, that's a rounding error on interest payments on the debt. This is unsustainable. So if you're not going to take in taxes on overtime, on tips, on Social Security, where does it end?
Well, by doing this, it's one step, one out of a number that are necessary to deal with that debt. In order to deal with the debt, you've got to do two things. You've got to limit your spending, because that's what is at the root of the inflation. You've got to limit your spending. You also have to hyper-start the economy. And by eliminating overtime federal income tax, that's just one small step on the growing the economy front. We want to encourage people to work. We're going to have to get domestic energy policy restarted again in this country.
How is it conservative, though? Because this would, Congressman, you know that this would just increase debts and deficits. How's that conservative?
Well, it's not going to increase debts and deficits. It's because it's going to put more money back in the economy, because that's where people are going to spend and invest. Is if they have it, they're going to put it right back in. It's going to grow the economy with a positive impact.
Congressman Fulcher, we'll leave it there. Republican from Idaho, thanks for being with us here on the Hill, the man who introduced the bill for no tax on overtime. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Former budget director?
I want to know what the numbers are. I mean, look, there's a
Tax Foundation says about $250 billion over 10 years. That's a lot of money.
$250 billion over 10 years is $25 billion a year, which is a significant amount of money. Look, I'm all for cutting taxes. I am. I agree with his arguments about allocation of resources. I would rather have the private sector invest $1 than the government invest $1. I'm sold on all of that. But at some point, it has to stop, right? If you continue to cut taxes down to zero, then the government raises no money. Yeah. So where are we now on the Laffer curve? Are we in the right spot? Are we sweet spot?
You just Laffer
We are not.
Yeah. We are not what?
We are not in the right spot on the Laffer curve. The Laffer curve, I'm not going to talk economics in front of Mick Mulvaney of anybody. But the thing is, everybody hates taxes. And everybody loves government spending.
There you go.
Surprise, surprise.
Here we are.
Yeah, that's how you get this massive debt. And we keep kicking the can in every election cycle. People say, hey, you know what would be great? We should spend more and tax less. Yes. I love it. Just keep doing it until we drive the car off a cliff.
Kamala Harris at the Teamsters today, Linda. Yeah. What is the probability of her actually getting that endorsement? Donald Trump has been fighting for it. Of course, we know unions have largely been Democratic, but I
think the odds are good, right? The Teamsters has traditionally backed the Democratic nominee for president. All that said,
transportation vibes coming off.
I can feel. Well, I did have to deal with the Teamsters during the UPS workers negotiations, but. The thing to keep in mind is what Sean O'Brien has said previously. A good portion of his membership is Republican. That's true of every single labor union. It was true of the Service Employees International Union when I worked there. So you have to take into account these members who pay their monthly dues and what do they think is going to be the best potential future for them. It's really important, though, I will say, that they get this endorsement, not just for endorsement's sake, but because labor unions deploy people. I was one of those people who was deployed cycle after cycle. The last presidential cycle I worked for SEIU for, we spent $85 million.
Well, I thought you were a Teamster.
Well, that's what I always heard. What I always heard as a Republican is that you're worried about the endorsement, not because of how the rank and file members are going to vote. They're going to vote their own way. They don't care how their leadership. They're not looking to leadership to tell them how to vote. It's the infrastructure that comes from the union that makes
It's the infrastructure. And for Democrats, it's about denying Republicans the endorsement, right? Even if the endorsement doesn't change a single vote, Kamala Harris doesn't want to have to deal with the news story about labor union supports Donald Trump.
So just a couple of the numbers here, Kelly. Labor union, or the Teamsters membership. 74. So what is that? 50 years ago. 2.2 million members. Right now, less than 1.3 million members. But in Pennsylvania, your home state, Ms. Meyer, 220,000 members in your home state, the key state.
So she wants that. She wants to win Pennsylvania. We were just talking about that on Friday when she was there in Wilkes-Barre. A lot of her message, we were saying then, was focused on workers. So it's looking as though, like you said, that it may be going to her this week, but it's definitely something that she wants to add to her belt to say she got that.
All right. The big story over the weekend, of course, the attempted assassination of Donald Trump for the second time, which the FBI is now investigating. J.D. Vance, I believe. Do we have the live picture? Show it if we can. J.D. Vance is now speaking in the state of Georgia. Let's listen to see if he comments.
Ralph Reed. Ralph, thank you not just for the kind introduction, but for your years of friendship. I first met Ralph, actually, when I was running in my primary race in the state, for the Republican Senate race in the state of Ohio. I think we had a connection from the very beginning, I think because we're both people of faith who care a lot about ensuring that our country lives according to the common good. And so Ralph and I have been close for a long time, and of course, thrilled to be here this evening. I also want to recognize some other VIPs who are here this evening. We have, of course, your incredible, patriotic, and very effective Governor Brian Kemp with his lovely wife, Marty. Brian and Marty, thank you both. The lights are really bright, so I can't see anybody that I'm introducing, so please just stand up or wave. I won't be able to see it, but the people behind us will. I want to thank Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr. Where's Chris? And my dear colleague and one of my favorite people in politics, the great senator from Alabama, Katie Britt. Katie, thank you. You have some of the very best congressmen and public servants in the state of Georgia. I know that Mike Collins is here. We're thrilled to have Mike. Thank you so much, Mike. We have, I think, the best name in the United States Congress, Barry Loudermilk. Barry, where are you? I know we're so grateful to have, not just here tonight, but on the Trump team, we have the great Tulsi Gabbard, former Democratic Congresswoman, but a true superstar and a true patriot. And by the way, you know, people think about our party right now. Think about the incredible team that we have. We have Brian Kemp, Donald Trump, Nikki Haley, Tulsi Gabbard, and Bobby Kennedy Jr. What an amazing team of patriots fighting for this country. But of course,
J.D.
there's a lot
Vance
of
there. We were
disagreement
waiting to see if he was going to make any comments for the events over the weekend. But what you just heard there, on two different occasions, J.D. Vance talking about Brian Kemp, the governor there in Georgia. Donald Trump has been no fan, and no fan publicly. And when you talk to Republicans, they'll tell you that if Donald Trump is to win in Georgia, he needs the help and support of Brian Kemp. It's why you've heard J.D. Vance talk about him a couple times already. We're going to continue to listen in to J.D. Vance, and we'll be right back here on the Hill, the other side of the break. Stay with us. Now we're going to listen in for a few minutes. Reaction on the other side.
The more that I thought about those questions, the more I increasingly found the answers in the Christian faith that I had discarded as a young man. And that realization that the basic truths about being a good man, about being a good husband, about being a dedicated father, those truths found their best expression in the Christian faith of my grandmother, and that led me back to Jesus Christ. And that, thank you. And that, I think, leads me a little bit into this campaign and race and why we're fighting for what we're fighting for. Because in this room, while we're disparaged by the media and disparaged by the Democrats as people who want to force our faith on other people, I think I speak for every single person in this room saying we don't want to force our faith on anybody. What we want is to recognize and to have motivate us the faith that is, I think, the source of all great truth in human history, and especially in this country. That we want our public policy to be motivated by the wisdom of loving thy neighbor. that we want our public policy to be motivated by an understanding that family is the most important thing in this country. It is the most important institution in our country, and if the family falls, everything else will suffer, and suffer dramatically so. We are motivated, in other words, by living our faith and ensuring that our public policy promotes the common good. And I think that at this moment in time, in 2024, with all the violence and all the negative political rhetoric, we need to remember above and beyond that we must love our neighbors, that we must treat other people as we hope to be treated, and that we must love our God and let it motivate us in how we enact public policy and how we live our faith and how we govern our nation. And that will make America a more prosperous and a healthier and a more sane and, most importantly, a better nation, a nation with virtue and with truth at its core than anything else. Now, I think there are a lot of ways in which the wisdom of the Christian faith can influence us and make us much better public servants in 2024. And I think there are so many ways in which our current leadership is failing, and failing not just when it comes to matters of economics, not just when it comes to matters of immigration, but when it comes to very basic matters of how do we promote a country where good people can get ahead, where people can live.
All right, we've been listening to Senator J.D. Vance, Donald Trump's running mate, Atlanta, Georgia, Cobb County, Faith and Freedom Coalition dinner there. Remarks from him to the audience there. Mick Mulvaney, part of this down there is to try to mend fences, to try to repair the relationship between Donald Trump and the sitting governor. Explain.
Georgia should be a lock for Donald Trump. He absolutely should. The reason you're seeing Kamala Harris down there is they sense weakness. And this goes back to the special Senate elections back in 2020, back to the Herschel Walker mess in 2022. The Democrats sense weakness. And at its root is this fight between Donald Trump and a very, very popular governor, Brian Kemp. They need to fix this relationship. They know they need to fix the relationship. It's the reason you heard J.D. Vance there mention Kemp a couple of times in the first 30 seconds.
Not just strong, but handsome, he said.
Did he say? No, I was going to say, I missed that.
He was effusive in his praise. Yeah. And when we look at the map, we look at the long-term trends in the races, and this is a nod to my friend Linda, who on the Hill Sunday has been talking about that North Carolina was in play for a lot longer than anybody else. North Carolina is actually a more favorable state demographically speaking than Georgia, and the fact that the Republicans won, or the Democrats won Georgia in 2020 was pretty remarkable. And Mick's right, Georgia shouldn't be a reach, but it has been.
Two things to say to that. Number one, don't underestimate the possibility that Brian Kemp may run for president in 2026 or 8, whatever the next time around. I'm hearing that out of the Georgia Republican.
Don't make us do it early. 28.
I'm doing it now. Secondly, how does she get on the Sunday show and I don't?
You're not available because you're not available because somebody's going to mass. Somebody's going to mass, so we take the Buddhist and you have to stay home.
Sunday mornings in the Mulvaney household are sacred, we know. So Donald J.D. Vance is down there trying to sort of court Brian Kemp. Kamala Harris, Democrats see that, and what's the in for them?
Well, Democrats have been spending money on the airwaves, have been sending their candidates down there and their surrogates as well. And there are two reasons for that. One is that you want the Republican ticket to have to play harder in Georgia. And of course, Mick talked about the rift that has existed and the kiss and make up actions continue on the Republican side. But Democrats also want to make sure they are getting our voters really enthusiastic about it. You've got Senator Warnock down there helping to bring voters of color in particular.
Demographics are a lot of college-educated suburbanites, wealthy suburbanites there, and also a big African-American population. Absolutely. That's how Democrats can crank it up and win.
And for Harris and her team, part of the calculation and the decision-making going forward is, do you spend time in the Midwest, right, and hold that blue wall, or How much time are you spending in North Carolina? How much time are you spending in Georgia?
And she's spending a lot of time, as we've been saying, in North Carolina and in Georgia. So she is choosing that route. We've covered countless trips to North Carolina just last week. So she continues to go there. They seem to think that they can win in North Carolina specifically. They say, and the governor has said, as we've been covering events, that they have that 2008 feeling, that they feel as though for the first time in, 16 years, that they can make sure that North Carolina goes blue, and they feel the same way about Georgia.
The Republican, and again, I live right on the border, right? So I live in a Charlotte media market. I see all of these ads. The Republican candidate for governor down there is trailing very badly. And it's a possibility that he drags Donald Trump down in that race. So it doesn't surprise me. Listen, if I'm a Democrat, I think I'm going to win Wisconsin. I think I'm going to win Pennsylvania. Maybe I'm going to win Michigan. I'd be spending as much time as I could in Georgia and North Carolina, which is exactly where they are.
She is going to the blue wall states, though.
True.
Next
Yeah, no, I wasn't
So
suggesting that she's not. What I'm saying is it's a part of the calculation because you can only be in one place at once. You have a fantastic breakdown on Iowa.
So good.
We'll get to that later in the week. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, joins us on the other side of the break. Stay with us here on The Hill. All right, so before we say goodbye here on The Hill, here's a story that caught our eye. This was, at one point, what the Cornell University professor Russell Rickford had to say about the October 7th attack by Hamas, a foreign terrorist organization, against Israel.
They were able to breathe for the first time in years. It was exhilarating. It was exhilarating. It was energizing.
Why are we talking about it? Well, Rickford has now resumed teaching on campus following a leave of absence. The university has condemned his comments as quote-unquote reprehensible. They did so last year, but they maintain in a recent statement, we reached out to them today, that the comments were, quote, made as a private citizen in his free time, end quote, and so he should not be barred from teaching. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, so I guess the position there is you can spew anti-Semitic garbage privately and thus still remain an employee because it was done privately.
Well, we all know that if he had shown up at a Klan rally or at a Proud Boys event, the university would feel very differently. They would not allow someone who has those views